So this is where we left off last time. We have the value cards here, and here we have the main visualizations on the main page. And then we also have visualizations here in the sidebar. Now, a problem with the application is that if we change the time range and request new data later from the API, what's going to happen is now we see that the date range changes and the graphs are reactive to the date range change. However, the application currently doesn't know what visualizations are on the main page. So if I'm deleting the bounce rate and I'm deleting the device category, then I would expect the application to only update the page views. However, if I'm going to change the date range again, we see that the page views graph is updating, plus the device category graph pops back into the page and the bounce rate pops back into the page as well. And the reason for this is because we have a RenderUI function here in the main visualization module. So we see that we have here a static vector, page views, device category, and bounce rate. And here we have the reactive data frames. So whenever we're requesting new data, these data frames are going to be reactive. The RenderUI gets triggered, and the page views, device category, and bounce rate are going to get put on to the page over and over again. So what we basically have to do is we have to tell our application after we're changing the date range, okay, so what are the visualizations currently on the page, and then only update these ones. If there are none on the page, then we don't have to put any visualization on the page and we don't have to update any of them. Similarly, if all of them are on the page, we have to update all of them and not just these three in here. So in order to do that, we're going to change the RenderUI function to an insertUI function, and we're going to use an observer to do that. And we're also adding an action button to the getData module below the date range. So we have to jump around a little bit. We have to jump to the getData module. We have to do some coding here in the main visualization module. And then in the JS script, we also have to get all the visualizations that are currently on the main page. And then that array that we have in JavaScript, we have to send it to Shiny and then render the graphs here in the main visualization module inside an observer with the insertUI function. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the action button first. So I'm gonna say div shiny action button. Then we have an input ID here. Let's call this API_call. Then we have no label, so it's only going to be an empty string. And then we'll have an icon where we say shiny icon filter. So because this one is in a module, we have to wrap this input ID inside a namespace. And then what we can do down below here is we can make this reactive here, we can make this an event reactive. And then inside here we'll say input $API_call. So this reactive only gets triggered when we're clicking the filter action button. And what we're going to do as well, we're going to say action_btn. Then we'll say shiny reactive input $API_call. And we're using this action button also in the main visualization module later on. That's why we're returning it here from the getData module. So we can run the app, see what happens. So we see that if we toggle this down, we have the action button here, but we also see that when we start the application, the main visualizations are not appearing on the page. So if I would click this filter button now, the visualizations are appearing here on the main page. And this is because when we're starting the app, here in the Get Data module, this action button hasn't been clicked yet. So this reactive never gets fired. So what we can do on app start, we can use the shiny.js package. And then we can simulate a click with the click function. The ID that should be clicked is the API underscore call ID, so the action button. And then we can see when the application starts. We simulate the click on the action button, and now the visualizations are appearing here. So what we're going to do next, we're going into the main visualization module. And what we're doing here, we'll add action btn as an argument. And then in here, we'll say shiny. We'll observe the event when the action button is clicked. Because it's reactive, it has to have the round brackets. And then in here, what we're going to do is basically the same as in the RenderUI function. So we're creating the HTML. We can call this insertHTML. And then in here, what we have to do is we'll say shiny insertUI. The selector is going to be the placeholder ID. So if you remember here in our application, we have a div with an ID placeholder. So we have the value cards above, and we have the placeholder ID, and then we have the main visualization module. So where we'll say after end, and then the UI that should be displayed is going to be insert HTML. So the HTML that was generated with the Google Analytics function in here. And what we have to do here as well, we only want this observer to be triggered when the application starts. So that means we only want this observer to be triggered once. So what we can do is we can put a requirement in here. And the requirement is that this observer only gets run when the action button is equal to 1. So if it gets clicked the first time, action button is equal to 1. If it gets clicked the second time, it equals to 2. So this evaluates to false, and the observer never gets run. So we can delete the RenderUI function here. And then secondly, what we have to do, we have another observer where we observe the exact same event when the action button, the filter action button gets clicked. However, the shiny requirement for this one is that the action button is now greater than 1. So after app start, whenever the user clicks the action button, then this observer gets triggered. So we can save this, and then in the main app.r file, we have to put, let's say action btn is equal to this one, $action btn. Because we're returning the action button from the df filtered date from the get data module down here. So now in this main visualization module, what we have to do in here is we have to, whenever the user clicks the action button, we have to know what visualizations are on the main page. And according to the visualizations that are on the main page, we have to update the visualizations with the new time range, with the new data. And we can do this in JavaScript. And how we're getting the visualizations that are on the main page is if we're looking into the Google Analytics function, then here we have an h2 header, and this header has the panel title class. So what we want to do is we want to grab all the panel title classes, and then from there we want to extract the h2 header. So what we're going to do in here, we'll say document.get element by ID. The ID that we want to get is here in the data module, the API call ID. And because this one is in a module, it has a namespace in front of it. And the namespace we defined here. So the getDataUI has the getData namespace. So in order for JavaScript to work, we have to put the namespace in front of it. And then we'll say add event listener. So we listen for a click whenever the action button gets clicked. And then afterwards, we're going into a function. And in this function, we have to know what visualizations are on the page currently. So we'll say current visualization, and then we'll say array.from, then we'll say document.get. Now we'll do elements by class name, and all the class names, we want to get all the class names that have the panel title class. And now we're turning the node list into an array. Now from there, we're just initializing an empty array. So we'll say current visualization on page. It's going to be an empty array. What we're going to do next is we're going to loop over this array. So we'll say current visualization. So for each element in that array, what we're going to do is we're going to push the inner HTML of the current visualization array into this new array. And this should give us all the h2 headers on the page. So afterwards, what we're going to do is we're going to say shiny dot set input value. We're going to access the current visualization on page array in Shiny with $, with input $, and then current visualization. And we want to send this JavaScript array to Shiny. And then we want to do this every time the button is clicked. Then we'll save this, and then in the app.r file, this is going to be an additional argument. So we'll say current underscore visualization is equal to shiny reactive, and then input $, current visualization. Then save this, and then you have to put the additional argument in here. So we'll say current underscore visualization, and hopefully we'll get a vector back with the h2 headers that are on the page currently. So because it's reactive, we can't forget the round brackets. And let's see if that works or if we get an error. So we get an error. Let's see where the error is coming from. So this one says, okay, misspelled it. Misspelled both of them. And then here in the main module, spelled correctly. And then let's see in the script, current visualization. Okay, let's run it again and see what happens. We still get an error. And it says could not find action button. And let's see which one it is, where the error is coming from. So in here we have action button, and here we have the action button as well. And then here we have the action button. And then in here we're returning the action button. And here with reactive input $, API underscore. Okay, I misspelled this as well. So we get the value cards, and now we get the page views. And now if I click this, and then click the action button, and then let's delete 2 of them, click the action button again. Nice, so it seems to work. So what we printed here is the first time I clicked on the action buttons, here in the main visualization module. Here we got page views, device category, and bounce rate. And then I deleted the page views in the device category. And then we only got the bounce rate at the end. So now if I have these visualizations, I again have to know what data set to use. Do I have to use the Google Analytics API? Or do I have to use the Google Search Console API? So I'm going to do a similar thing to this vector here, except so the names are going to be the same. However, here I'm just going to say page views, session duration, we'll have the bounce rate. We also have the device category. Then we have the visitor map. And let's see what else we have here. Channel groupings. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's do channel groupings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as well. And the page views, there it's using the Google Analytics data, session duration as well, bounce rate, channel groupings, device category 2. And then so far only the visitor map is using the Search Console API data. So we'll call this visualizations. Then we'll run it. We'll save this one. Then we're going into the main module again. And then what I can do is I can give these ones I just put these ones in a vector. And then what I have to do is I'll say visualizations in X. So what I'm going to get back is I'm going to get back a vector of length 6 of trues and falses. And then what I need to do is I need the square brackets to get only the true ones. And then from there I need the names. So now I have GA, 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 which is true. Page views uses GA, device category uses GA, and the bounce rate is using GA as well. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to say per, then I'm looping over two vectors in parallel. So one vector is going to be the current visualizations, and then the other vector is going to be the, let's call this what df, what data frames we have to use. So and then I can, instead of x, I'll just substitute this with the current visualizations that we're getting. So .y is what df, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create the visualizations. So in order to do that, I'm using the switch if n function. So in this one we have two arguments, one the visualizations and one what data frame it is. So the visualizations are going to be .x, and then the data frame is going to be, we'll say if, now we'll say .y is equal to GA. Then what we have to use is the GA data, else we'll use the Search Console data. Okay, I think this should work. So we'll call this one plotly underscore plots, because these are only the plotly plots that we're creating. And where we want to insert these plotly plots is here inside this div. And inside this div we have a header class, and the header class is basically the h2 headers that we're getting from here, from this vector. So these are basically the h2 headers, and so page is going to be a class and views is going to be a class as well in here. So what we have to do is I'm going to say x, and then I'm going to use the string r package, and then I'm going to replace all the white space with a dot. So this is what we're getting. And then I'm also going to say paste 0, and then I'm going to put a dot in front of, now I'm going to put a dot in front of each element of the vector. And then what I can do, I can just call this CSS underscore selector, and then the X again, I'm going to substitute this with the current visualizations. And what I need next is then the shiny insertUI function. So the selector is going to be the CSS selector. Now where is going to be, so if we say question mark insertUI, we get the documentation here. And it says, so before begin is before the selector element itself. After begin is just inside the selector element before its first child, and then before end is just inside the selector element after its last child. And we're just going to use after begin. And then the UI is going to be plotly plots. And because this is a list and this is a vector, we again need a function from per map2 again, because we're mapping over the CSS selector vector, and then also the plotly plots list in parallel. And we're creating the anonymous function, where we can just copy paste the insert UI function in here. Now instead of CSS selector, we're using .x, and instead of, so we have to say UI equals, instead of the plotly plots, we're using .y. So if we save this, and let's see how this runs and how it looks like. So if we now, for example, remove the bounce rate and then the device category, then we're changing the date to July, and we're clicking on the filter button. We see it works now. The other visualizations are not on the main page anymore. Only the page views one has been updated, which is what we wanted. And now we have two visualizations in here. This is the updated one that we just got, and this is the previous one. So if I would change this again to the 5th of November, we would get 3 visualizations. So this is from the 5th of November, this is the previous one, and this is the one from the very beginning. So what we want to do is we want to write some jQuery or JavaScript code that's deleting the, that's going to delete the visualization that's currently on the main page. And then afterwards, we're going to add the new visualizations. So how we can do this is basically what we have to do is we're going to create a shiny.js function. So we'll say shiny.js dot remove plotly plots. Then we'll say function. And in that function, what we have to do is we have to identify all the plotly plots that are currently in there, and then we have to remove them. So what we have to figure out is we have to figure out the ID of the plotly plots. So if we're inspecting the elements, and then let's maybe go into here, and then let's just click on one of the plots. Here, the page views one. So we're seeing that all of the plots have an HTML widget ID. And the ID starts with HTML widget, dash, and then some random number. So what we can do here in the JavaScript file is we can say document dot get element by ID, and the element that we want to get is the ID that starts with HTML widget and then whatever. And we'll call this all plotly plots. And then from there, we're doing a similar thing as above here. We want to get now the ID of this node list. So what we're going to do is we'll just say all IDs is initialized to an empty array. Then for each element in that node list, we want to push the IDs into all IDs. So we'll do this. And now we have all the IDs in the all IDs array. Now from there, what we want to do is we want to loop over all the IDs. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say for each ID, what we want to do is we want to remove this ID on the page. So we'll say element dot remove. And this then removes hopefully all the plotly plots before they're plotted. So this is a shiny.js extension. So in order to load this function here in R, what we can do is we'll say shiny.js, and then I'm not sure what the function name was again for including, oh, it's called extend shiny.js. So now we have to specify the script. So the script is in GA dashboards www folder, and then it's called scripts.js. So we'll say scripts.js, and then the function that we want to use here in the server is remove plotly plots function. So we're using the remove plotly plots function inside the get data module. So what we have in here is another observer. So we'll say shiny observe event. The observe event is going to be triggered when the action button is clicked. So API underscore call. Then inside that observer, we'll say shiny JS. Then we'll say JS $, and that's how we're referencing that this function should run in here. Then we're running the remove plots function. And then we can put in another requirement. The requirement is that this observer only runs when the action button value is greater than 1. So when it has been clicked twice or more times than that. What we also can do is we can say ignore init, which is true. So it's going to be ignored when the application starts as well. But since we have the requirement in there, this is not really necessary, but I just put it in. So now if we save this, hopefully it works, and maybe I'm missing something. So we get the page views. So if we delete the bounce rate and the device category, we'll toggle this down and then change the date range to September. Then click the action button. We'll get an error, and it says error in the observer, attempt to apply non-function. So if I go in the data module 1, it might be that I have to put the round brackets in here, but I'm not sure. Let's maybe do question mark JS and see how the function is called. JS. Okay, I think we have to do it with the round brackets that we were missing before. Let's run it again. So now again, we remove the bounce rate. We'll remove the device category. We'll toggle this down, change the date range, and we still get an error. So I just looked at the documentation again, and the mistake I did that I did the round brackets for the JS one. So it's just JS $ and then whatever the function name is we want to use in the scripts.js file. So now if we run it again, then we'll remove the device category, then the bounce rate. Now we're changing the date range again. We'll still get the two plots in one page, so there must be some error here in the scripts.js file. So what I realized what I did wrong is instead of get element by ID, we should have done query selector all, and then we're getting all the IDs that start with HTML widget. So now if we run the app again, and then when we're deleting the device category and also the bounce rate, then it should work. So we'll delete device category and bounce rate, and then we're going to change the date to July, and then we'll see the plot gets deleted and the new one is going to get inserted. So next time what we have to do is we just have to give the panel body a certain height, because when we're deleting the HTML widget or the plotly plot, there's no height for the panel body. And then when the plot gets inserted again, it has a certain height again. So the code for this video is in the description below. There's a link to my GitHub. There's also a link to my blog. See you at the next video.